Goedemorgen in the Netherlands, goedemiddag in Malaysia. Selamat petang, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, for more than 10 years, I think MDBC and Marie have worked together. Yeah, Marie, with Cultural Impact, has provided cultural competency sessions to Dutch student interns who had just came to Malaysia, just arrived here. So very useful sessions on Malaysian culture and Malaysian do's and don'ts. Of course, today will be actually the other way around with this MDBC Education 360, how to deal with the Dutch. Well, of course, it sounds that this is more meant for Malaysians. Quite to our surprise, immediately after our first announcement on this event, the majority of registrations were from Dutch, from the Dutchies. Maybe just like me, many have spent most of their life here. I spent more than half my life here in Malaysia, and I guess we're stuck in the middle, and maybe we also require a refresher on how to deal with the Dutch. But ultimately, as we will probably see sooner or later in the screen, the majority, I think 75% of the registered attendees are Malaysians. And not to disappoint you, we have a very distinguished panel today for this session. With Ambassador Aert, with MDBC Chairman Zainal and Board Director Soert, to share their bilateral experiences with you. So I'm pretty sure that it's going to be a fantastic, insightful session. Wishing everybody a lot of fun. And Marie, best of luck to you in moderating this session, my dear.
Well, I think that people will enjoy working in a Dutch environment because it is quite informal. The hierarchy in a Dutch company is definitely there. But as a boss, you should not insist on it because that is not so appreciated by the people around you. Everybody always knows in a company, in a Dutch company, who is the boss. But if the boss plays the boss too much, that is not so much appreciated. I think if you allow me to elaborate a little, when you are in Holland, Dutch behavior is normal, so you don't notice it. The advantage of being abroad is that you see how other people behave, how people in other countries behave, and as such, you notice that there are some characteristics that the Dutch have that stand out and that are really, really different. I think at the root of our behavior is Calvinism. Calvinism in the Dutch context, meaning hard work, be serious, be professional. There's lots of proverbs in Dutch that come out of Calvinism, such as idleness is the devil's pillow, hard work and dedication will build houses like castles, etc., etc. There are many more that all indicate the merit of hard and serious work. Like I said, we are also an egalitarian country, I think. I always have the idea that in the United States, the value of a person is measured by how rich he is. That's not the case in the Netherlands. You may be wealthy or you may be important, but that does not automatically grant you respect by other people. That respect you will have to earn. People feel that they are mostly equal to you. That also makes the Dutch the worst waiters you can find in the world, I find, of which we can give examples later. But yeah, there's an egalitarianism in the Dutch that is quite strong. It also explains in part the informal way that people deal with each other within companies. Another point that is important, I think, in the Netherlands is consensus. Decisions tend to be built on consensus. If consensus cannot be reached, then the one who is highest, the boss, will have to make a decision, obviously. But there is always an effort to get everybody on board. And an authoritative directive management does not go down very well with the Dutch. People like to be involved and like to have their say in decision making. And another thing that stands out, it was mentioned in one of the terms, I do think that we are good in teams and that we are very innovative, always looking for better ways to do things, sharper ways to do things. It never stops. So it's a number of elements that stand out: informality, egalitarian, innovative. Are we rude? Yes, we are, but it's not our intention. We are very poor at packaging a message nicely, like the British do. Like I mentioned the other day, if a British person totally disagrees with you, he will say, I've listened to your remarks and I really appreciate the way you have put forward your points. And there's a lot of merit in it too. However, there are a few things I would like to remark. And next, he will totally settle down whatever you said. But in the Dutch don't have this elegance. They will say, I disagree with you. Quite straight. And if you're not used to it, if you come from another culture, this is kind of like a shock. You would expect him to be a little bit more polite in expressing his disagreement. The Dutch are really not very good at that. We call it efficiency, but I can see that it comes across as you have to get used to it. But it's a bit of a shock for people from other countries to deal with this directness that we have.
Maybe to start off with, when you ask this, I think the first thing that comes in mind is moving back 7.5 years when I just arrived in Malaysia. If I could come up with any, say, professional encounters that really showed me how Dutch I actually am and how my expectations were not being met in the new cultural environment here in Malaysia. But the one example that really stuck to me actually is I recall clearly walking in the pedestrian walkway between KLCC and Bukit Bintang in Malaysia. You have these air-conditioned walkways that connect you between various locations here in KL for those who are not residents here. And I was walking along these like air-conditioned tunnels, and I would almost constantly bump into other pedestrians, literally be walking on their heels. I was confused because the Malaysians were walking here, they were walking there, they were walking everywhere, and they were clearly too slow as well. So I was in a rush. I was going from A to B. I wanted to go there efficiently in a certain orderly and straight way, and I couldn't. And I thought that this would be something I wouldn't get adjusted to. But nowadays, when I'm back home in the Netherlands, or I don't know what home is actually anymore, but I notice that I sense that everyone in Holland is in a rush and in a hurry, and that I am a little bit adjusted to the Malaysian pace. So I guess this is just a silly example, but I think it indeed shows that the Dutch people really appreciate a certain sense of order. That everything is regulated. So how you walk, where you walk, we have a certain ingrained cultural expectation about it. And the same applies for work. We have a certain expectations of how you go from A to B. And we're always in a rush. We run on the clock. Our schedules are full. We plan things ahead days in advance. And if you, one of the feedbacks I got from my team when I asked them, so how has it been for you? Because they've become cross-cultural experts over the years, but then from the Malaysian side, how is it for you to work with the Dutch? And one of the remarks I got from them is, one thing I can't get my head around is that it's so difficult to plan a last-minute meeting. You can't, because everyone completely schedules their agendas to the brink, which we Dutch deem very efficient, but it also leaves zero room for any flexibility during the process. So those are the things that I think learned to also let go, to accept that you can get from A to B, maybe not exactly knowing how you're going to get there, but just start your journey. and also not to plan everything completely ahead, because that just doesn't, that is the cultural expectation in the Netherlands, but that's not the cultural expectation in Malaysia. And I find that actually very refreshing, that you don't have to schedule your meetup, whether business or professional, weeks and weeks in advance, but you can just call for a meeting and someone might be available on the spot.
That's an interesting comment, because when we did the session on Sarawak, that's what the Sarawakian were saying that the Malaysians are too orderly. Whereas in Sarawak, you can meet anyone, anytime. It's always, when we talk about culture, it's always a question of spectrum. In the chat there also that I like, yes, you're relating to your story, Sue, that in the Netherlands you'd be yelled at if you're in the wrong bicycle lane.
That's right.
Whereas in Malaysia, it's totally acceptable that if you miss your turn off on the highway, you cross the hard shoulder and you turn on left, and no one will honk their horns. It's a good, and on the one hand, I experience it also as a bit more accepting and tolerant from that side. Whereas in Holland, if you do that, you get some angry horns from the car. Well, is it good? Is it bad? Or it's just different, I would say, but it's quite typical. Yeah.
Yeah, so for the Malaysian in the room here, remember, you do not do that in the Netherlands. You just need to be where you're supposed to be. Well, and I see another comment here saying that it will cause accident, and it's all about expectations, I guess. It will cause accident in the Netherlands because nobody expects that to happen, whereas in Malaysia, you know it can happen. So you're prepared in a different manner to that.
I remember that my ministry always tells us you should give the local staff a lot of independence and a lot of responsibility, and that way they can grow and they can develop themselves, etc. But my experience in Asia is that this is maybe a good advice for some people, but for many people they are not comfortable with it in Asia. The Dutch, indeed, they would like to have this responsibility, etc. But people in Asia and Japan, in particular, are very comfortable with giving very clear directions about what to do, because that way the responsibility is not theirs, because their boss told them to do A and then B and then C. So they do it, and they do it correctly, and they are happy. The boss is happy. But after you tell them do A, it stops. Then you have to tell them, okay, and now go on to B. In the Netherlands, that would not go down very well. You should tell somebody you are responsible for this in its entirety, and now you handle it the way you think it is best. And if you need any advice or you have any problems, then you know where to find me. That attitude is quite different in Asia. Many people are not so comfortable with being burdened with responsibility and about what things to do.
Zainu, your own experience when it comes to sense of responsibility.
Sure, Amari. Yeah, okay. I think it's a bit difficult to be very Malaysian in this one, because I've spent more than 30 years with Shell, and my way of looking at things in terms of decision making and the consensus seeking process is very much influenced by the way the Shell people work. So what happens is, as Art rightly say, lots of Malaysians, when they first join the company, of course, they're a bit more reluctant to speak their mind for fear that they may say the wrong things and upset especially the more senior people. But over time, because you are in the same environment, you're in the same business environment, Malaysians as well as Dutch will actually engage quite well in any decision-making process in the boardroom or in small meetings. And you'll find that the only thing that is difficult for some Malaysians still, despite being in the Dutch environment of Shell, for instance, some of them still have difficulty in separating between what's personal and what's business. So if in the discussion sometimes a Dutch person will bluntly say certain things that he disagrees or he doesn't agree on, very bluntly towards a Malaysian, the chances are the Malaysian would take it personally and not take it as a business discussion. And unfortunately, the Dutch person doesn't understand that. So the discussion will go on. They'll come to a final resolution in the end. But after the meeting, you'll find that the Dutch person suddenly realized that this other person is not talking to him anymore or her. And he just wonders why. So, we are good friends. We were good friends before. But after this meeting, suddenly he doesn't want to speak to me. So I have to explain to the Dutch guy that, it's not that simple. For a Malaysian, sometimes they don't separate personal and business discussions. And when you are too hard on a person in a meeting, he or she takes it personally and will not actually forgive you until you apologize to the person and explain that, I didn't mean to you personally. It's just a business discussion. But the consensus seeking approach is always there in Shell, because that's how we were brought up.
Because I think that's a very, very true point. I think in Dutch, a very typical thing that you would hear from a Dutch person is, that was a good discussion. That was a goede discussie. So even having a potentially slightly heated debate where you disagree and you present your arguments is actually seen as something positive. It is almost like part of, I would say, our cultural rituals, that as part of the decision-making process, you need to have this goede discussie, a good discussion about it, where you voice your opinions, and that helps, we believe, to come to, say, an optimal solution, because you take into account all views and all the stakeholders. And in that sense, also a point that which also Zaino made in terms of hierarchy. Yes, there's a hierarchy also in the Netherlands. But that's more like different roles that you have in the company. But in terms of opinion, everyone's opinion counts. So especially if it's in an area where, for example, someone is a technical expert, he may disagree even with the CEO of the company. That's actually expected, that you voice your opinion even to your CEO. And I think that's something, if you're Malaysian dealing with the Dutch, to keep in mind, that don't be afraid to voice out your opinion, because conversely, from the Dutch side, it will probably be actually expected from you that you do so, and not voicing that opinion might make people actually doubt your competence. That sounds a bit negative, but if you're in a very Dutch environment, not voicing your opinion might, to Dutch people, indicate that, no, maybe he doesn't have that opinion on it. Whereas for a Malaysian, I usually find that when you are, sometimes when you ask for an opinion, you get the response, give me 5 minutes to think about it and I'll get back to you. And that's, I think, for us Dutchies, something to take into account. Literally, when asking my team as well for some input, this is one of the responses I got. That's a nice question. I'll call you back. Because they just want to take some time to formulate it. And I'll get an answer that says the Dutch tend to be a bit critical and tend to choose this slightly more safer and a bit more familiar route. Whereas a Dutch person would say the Dutch are just plain conservative, perhaps. And what the farmer doesn't know, the farmer will not eat, is one of the sayings also to add to Aart's sayings. It's quite typical.
Yeah, Marie, the very first time in my career that I met with a ministry in our ministry, I disagreed with him. And within 3 minutes, I was kicked out of the room.
So it doesn't work all the time?
No. He wanted me to do something. I bluntly refused because I thought it was a very poor idea. So he told me to, shouted me out of the room. And I said, no wonder there are only yay-sayers around you. Well, it didn't hamper my career, fortunately, but you do have to stand up for your opinion in the Netherlands. It's in the end appreciated. I think even by the minister at the time, although he was very upset, I didn't have any repercussions anyway. So
that is a very important point, I think, because, and Zaino, correct me if I'm wrong, is that here we can't believe that if we say something that will not be accepted or appreciated, there will be no consequences. And hence, we tend to be a little bit guarded in how we say things, thinking of the potential repercussion.
You're right. Because you know what they say in the Malays, I guess the Malays and the British, to a point, tend to speak in layers. We speak in layers. By that I mean, you don't really say what you want to say. You say in a very convoluted way, And the only way you can understand that is to peel the layers. Whereas the Dutch, they don't have these layers. All the layers have been peeled. You're stark naked. So whatever you say is so clear. There's nothing to hide behind those words.
Yes, but Mary, if I may add, this is the cause of many misunderstandings. Since the messages in Asia are layered and are packaged very nicely, quite often the Dutch do not hear a clear yes or do not hear a clear no or I agree, while actually that message is given, but not in a clear Dutch way. So this is the cause of misunderstandings quite often. Even at home, I still have this issue at times that I think there is still room for negotiation, but in the Japanese way, apparently a clear no was expressed. But not in the Dutch way, So I still feel there's an opening, but unfortunately.
I think indeed it stems a bit from the equality that we value in the Netherlands, and where everyone's opinion counts. And everyone is also, I think, if a Dutch person wants to be heard and wants to have someone asking for your opinion, or wants to have a platform where he can voice his opinion, and we think that sharing those opinions and having such a good discussion about it is valuable, because it helps to bring all the perspectives in and all the standpoints in and from all the stakeholders, and therefore will lead to a better solution, as opposed, because more people, more minds know more perspective, know more than just the boss telling us what to do, despite the boss's experience, etc. I think that is one factor. The second factor is indeed also, in terms of the importance of the consensus seeking processes, is also that, conversely, not doing it indeed and not making people feel heard will bite you in the tail during the actual execution of the ultimate decision. Mm-hmm. So you might have a very good plan, but if you've not sought that consensus, people might feel that they will not identify with the solution. They will not identify with the plan because they've not been heard. They've not voiced out their opinion on it. And if it's not, there's not a broad basis for doing so, that could jeopardize actually the execution of the plan, because in that sense, Dutch are also quite egalitarian. Even though the boss might say so, that this is the plan, if you feel that it's a bad plan, you will still say it's a bad plan, and you might not support it. So it's also to ensure a broadly supported decision and a good execution of that decision, that the Dutch manager would seek that consensus, seek everyone's opinion, and then he is the manager. So it is his role to make a decision on it and present the plan forward. And if he's done his job well, that means that people will recognize their input into the plan. And it's okay that if you've given your opinion and ultimately the direction is another one than what you thought and your input is given, but at least you've been heard and your arguments have been heard, and you may agree to disagree. That's totally fine. But it's quite risky not to seek that consensus first before implementing a decision as a Dutch manager with a Dutch team.
I couldn't have voiced it any better. This is exactly what it is. You may have, as the ultimate responsible person, an idea of what you want to do. But first of all, it is always good to ask your staff, to present it to your staff and ask for their input, because maybe there are things that you have not thought of. And secondly, by doing that, you will get them on board. They have been heard, they know where you're going, and they are committed that way. So consensus is very important.
Well, I'll quote what happens when you are in Shell. We do practice very much the consensus-seeking approach, and they always talk about, as Sir mentioned very clearly, the advantage of having and Art mentioned as well, consensus-seeking, that you get everybody's view on the table before you come to a decision, which ultimately will become a very robust decision. But sometimes you get bosses who are not that well, say, suited in terms of performing that role. So you end up sometimes with only one or two persons speaking most of the time, with the rest keeping very quiet, because by nature, they're not that outspoken. And it is so important for the leader or the chairman of the meeting to always go around the table at least once, if not twice, to make sure that every single individual speaks. And in Shell, that happens a lot, because you'll find that most of the time, the ones who will speak will be either the Dutch or the British, and Malaysians normally don't say very much. So a good leader will always go around the table and say, how about you, whoever the Malaysian guy is, to make sure that that opinion is being expressed. And far too often I find that in meetings whereby people get carried away with the discussion, the chairman forgets to seek the views of each and every one and come to a decision which ultimately has not taken into account one major perspective. I think that's so important. So consensus seeking is not just about just getting everybody to speak. You better make sure that everybody has a chance to speak and not be forgotten in when you get lost in the discussion. You should not forget to make sure every single one. And you know that the Asians normally are one of the last to speak. So make sure that you don't forget to ask them to give their view. And that's what happens in Shell a lot. You have to make sure sometimes to remind the chairman, by the way, X and Y has not spoken at all during the discussion. Can you please make sure you get their views?
Direct communication, transparency, which is one of the first thing I think. If I go back to our word cloud for a minute, straightforward, blunt, sarcastic, direct. What is it behind the Dutch straightforwardness and directness?
It's but we would call it efficient, direct communication. Mind you, I do realize, having been abroad for many years, that it comes across as quite rude to most people not from the Netherlands. I think that even within Europe, among Europeans, the Dutch have some sort of a reputation of being even shorter and more direct than most other European compatriots.
Where do you think that comes from within the Dutch culture? Where would you pin it to?
Well, in the area where I come from, which is the countryside in the east of the Netherlands, there is a great distrust of people who need a lot of words to explain something. We feel that maybe they are trying to trick us, or that they don't know exactly what to do or to say. We would like them to get to the point and keep it simple. And the more words they use, the more reluctant we are actually to believe them. But that's where I come from, and it's a small country. Maybe in other parts of the country it's different. But there is merit in being accurate and short in Holland. It's appreciated, and to be clear. But I do realize that abroad you have to adapt, because really sometimes it's offensive in another cultural context.
Yeah, I think actually quite true. It might also stem from the fact that we've had quite a few wars with the Brits. So maybe we're just trying to be different from the Brits, who do indeed package their messages a bit more diplomatically. Now, I think it also is related to the seeking opinions of each other. I think what is really valued in the Netherlands is being genuine. So if someone is a genuine person, it means that he's open, he's transparent, he's just a regular guy. So even for up to, for example, the example of our prime minister going on his bicycle to his work and doing in the weekend the grocery shopping for his mother in his jeans. It's not the layers around it, in both in the language but as well as in your appearance. Being just showing exactly what your opinion is, showing who you are. Actually, that's very much appreciated in the Netherlands. It's genuinity basically is that's what we feel is genuine. I think we need to keep in mind that the Dutch have not such a keen sense of of peeling off the layers in the messages as Malaysians have. We've just not been trained in such an environment. So do take into account that that we might misinterpret a message if it's not packaged a bit directly. And at the same time, that the Dutch really appreciate it actually, and really don't mind directness and frankness in a conversation. So I think the advice would be to, well, I think obviously in cross-cultural communications, we both need to take a step closer towards each other. So on the Malaysian side, keep that in mind, that don't assume your message is understood correctly. It might be good to just double check if the message has landed and the way that you had intended to, and do be a bit more. If for you it feels blunt, probably for a Dutch guy it feels very diplomatic. And on the Dutch side, as a Malaysian, do encourage also your Dutch counterpart to give feedback to you as well, to just double check if the message was indeed understood. Yeah.
It's not that bad actually, because maybe I'm a bit more open, but indeed in the very first few years with Shell, I've worked with the Dutch for more than 40 years, 42 years to be exact, and in the first few years it was a bit overwhelming sometimes, not only because of the way they speak, but their size, they're all 6-footers, and here's some Malaysian 5 foot. So, but the thing is, Malaysians have to get used to the fact that the Dutch are blunt. I mean, to put it very clearly, they're direct speaking, they're blunt, but they mean well, as we all heard. They all mean well, and it's to adjust to that fact, because we are used to an environment whereby the people don't always speak their mind directly. They always, like I say, speak in layers. So when you're dealing with the Dutch, I like it because I know exactly where I stand. And I know exactly what they mean, and I know exactly what I have to do to deal with them. So when they are direct to me, I'm direct back to them. The disadvantage for me, of course, is having worked with the Dutch for so long, I tend to practice the same behavior as they do with my Malaysian colleagues, especially in Petronas. And that's a no-no. With Petronas, you have to be very careful how you speak. So I always have to tell myself, I'm not speaking to a guy from Shell. I'm speaking to a guy from Petronas who are very Malaysian. And I have to adjust the way I speak with them, because sometimes I do upset them. But because of my position in Shell, and because I know most of the Petronas senior guys by name, by first name as well, so they tend to tolerate me. But I can tell you, if I were to meet some other people who are like in the government offices who I don't meet so often, I have to be really careful how I address the issues that I face when dealing with them, because I know I've upset a few of them. I remember still when I was called in for an interview, they wanted to offer me one of the CEO jobs in GLC, and it wasn't something that I want. And normally, a Malaysian, when you're offered a job, a CEO job of a GLC, you say, let me think about it, even though you don't want it. Let me think, it's such a great idea and all that. And then you tell the man, I'll come back in next week or 2 weeks' time to give you a decision. But unfortunately, because of my Dutch upbringing, my first reaction was to say, no, I'm not interested in that job. And that was it. So like art, the meeting lasted no more than 5 minutes. I was out of the room.
Well, you have been really contaminated by the Dutch, if I may put it this way.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay, I've been working with Dutch for more than 24 years. The way I'm working with local company before as well. It's different perspective, different approach. To me, I've been thrown into deep end, but as long as you know how to get out of the trouble or solve the problem, you're going to get all the support that you need. But you have to show that you have the creative mind that you can do something. There's no restriction. You can approach from all the way to the top. There's no nothing blocking you. Not like if you look working for a local company, locally, establishment, you need to go layer by layer. But with Dutch, there's no limit for you to. You can reach the CEO anytime you want. That's the difference.
And was this easy to do for you as a Malaysian then, or did it take some time to get used to?
No. I mean the way how I joined the Dutch company, I was offered a job, and straight away I was put on the job, and I have to survive with quick learn on the job quickly and get adjusted to it. You can get all the help. You know where to get your help. That's about it. Just move on.
So that goes back to what Hart was saying at the beginning in terms of the need for being innovative in teams, and the example of speaking up. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hi. So I have an interesting mix of cultures. My team is all Malaysians, and our headquarters is in the Netherlands. I'm not Dutch either, so that makes it even more interesting. We are working really hard on trying to bring the two cultures together and find common ground. I find I can relate a lot to what Art said, also Zainul, about the layering of messages. This is our team here in Malaysia has to work closely with their colleagues in the Netherlands, and the messages from Malaysia to the Netherlands often need translating to understand what is really what is being communicated here. And sometimes that frustrates our colleagues in the Netherlands, and they will ask, well, I didn't understand. Well, what do you mean? Is that a yes or a no? Is it? So what I found, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I think in Asia, the culture is that you should not convey negative messages. You should only talk about the positive, the good things, the things that are working, not the things that are broken. And people seem to hesitate to disagree or to say that's not a good idea or we should not do that. And that causes issues because if there's agreement or if there's a lack of disagreement, it's understood in the Netherlands that then you're good to go. You're on board with this and we will proceed, only to find out later that these people were not necessarily in agreement. They didn't like that idea, just were shy, or maybe, some of the people here tell me it's impolite. It could be perceived as impolite that if you say it's not a good idea. So yeah, it's work in progress. It's improving. And what we found that helped is to send people to the Netherlands and bring colleagues from the Netherlands to Malaysia to have more face-to-face interaction. Then it becomes really better and easier. Behind a keyboard, it's really difficult, but face-to-face, it was easier to communicate. So now with COVID, we cannot do that, physically send people abroad. So we are doing more video instead of phone call and email to at least get the body language to help translate or delayer some of those messages.
I've been working on and off with the Dutch company, not really working with them, but representing them in Malaysia. I have no problem with the different cultures. I think it's a question of understanding the cultures. Yeah, I mean you cannot change behavior, but at the same time, if you notice the behavior of the Dutch, or it's also depending on the job scope. You know, if you meet business development people all the time, they seem to understand the culture better than an engineer, for example. So for me, it's a question of understanding the Dutch, and the Dutch understanding the the Malaysian, so that you can work together. I think it's maybe difficult to assimilate totally and behave exactly like a Malaysian if you are here, and if I go to Holland, if I go around in Holland, people are completely different. So you just have to understand that's how they behave. Huh?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I just recently joined a Dutch company. And so I have no experience about dealing with the Dutch. So it's an open question, of course. I've been told by one of my colleagues who is US based that Dutch people would always, as a manager, your manager will always try to challenge you as long as he feels that you have potential and that you are an interesting potential for the company. If he challenges you, then you should take this as a positive sign because it means that he trusts that you can go further and so on. And if he does not challenge you, then it means that there's anything wrong going, or there's he think you reached the maximum that you could, and that's it. Does it make sense? Or
Yeah, very, very interesting question, Jinsi. I think the answer is both a yes and a no to that. I think it depends on the style of that particular manager. It could be very true if that particular manager indeed has that type of style, then you should indeed, if you are being challenged, you should take it as a positive sign, because yes, indeed, this is part of the process of helping to find the best way to get from A to B, and also to in that interaction to see how where he can help and where he can assist and where you can develop as well. Conversely, I would also not say that it's correct that if it doesn't happen, it means that he doesn't have the faith or trust in you. I think it does depend on the manager's personality and his leadership style. I would just say if it does happen, indeed, it could be a very Dutch thing, and then definitely do not take it as a criticism. Then I would take it indeed positively as a method to come to a better solution and to help you develop indeed. Yeah.
If the boss is very interested in your idea, he might want to dig a little deeper. But it might also be that he really likes what you are doing and he's happy with it, and he doesn't feel the need to challenge you at that moment. So it could be either. There's no golden rule here.
Yes, see what the Dutch say. Okay. So,
well, I'm
Jusara's from
I'm Brazilian, living here for 15 years now, and doing more or less what you do for the Tropical Institute. So helping people to understand, Dutch people understand the Brazilian culture, basically, and foreigners also to understand Dutch culture here. And what I could add is that I also see that Dutch is a very caring society. So I see also in the consensus the aspect of inclusiveness. So I mean, I can see that Dutch people need to express an opinion, this individual aspect of expressing an opinion, and that can be really to say what you want, but also to be heard. Yeah. And at the same time, the equality. So it's opportunity for all of us to say what we are thinking. So, but also it's a very inclusiveness. And the aspect of be heard, it's quite interesting, because sometimes I have complaints from my neighbors, for instance, about my dog barking. And well, this is normal, this is nature. What can I do with my dog? But the fact that I listen my neighbor and I said I will try to, when the dog is too much, to put inside, and so that is enough. So sometimes it's really the consensus. It's more, in my views, about the discussion than really the solution. But the fact that everybody is involved, at the end, everybody is engaged in getting a solution and do implementation. Yeah.
I would advise for instance, in Malaysia, but all foreigners to bear with us, to be patient with the Dutch and not to be easily offended, because indeed they will come across as rude, but they have the best of intentions. And another one on the reverse side, I thought the remark of Zainul very significant. Messages come to us in layers and nicely packaged. And I think it would be good for the Dutch, when they start working in an environment such as Malaysia, to be aware of that and to really step back and ask themselves, okay, what was the message here? Was this a yes or a no? And then maybe to dig a little bit deeper in order to understand exactly what is going on.
I can very much relate to that as well. Also with the be patient element. I think one topic that is also quite relevant to share is the notion of clarity and grip on the situation. I think Dutch people, if you go to Holland, it's a very orderly country of straight roads and canals and railroads. It's a very structured country, and that's also what our culture is. We are very structured, and as opposed to that, in Malaysia, if you look outside to the roads in KL, it is more organic. And I think that is also reflected in culture, and that from both sides, I think we need to keep in mind. So for a Malaysian, I think it is worth understanding that what we are seeking an optimum solution, we are seeking opinions, and we are also seeking clarity. And what I sometimes get from, and it's a topic where I still sometimes my Malaysian colleagues who deal a lot with the Dutch, sometimes already for 10 years, they still have this they still have this point. Like, I've been doing this for 10 years, still they question me how I'm going to do it. And whereas in a Malaysian might say, okay, you've done this for 10 years, so I totally rely on you how you're going to achieve this goal. A Malaysian a Dutch might be a bit more uncomfortable with it. What might be asking you, okay, how are you going to do it? What steps are you going to take? And he would want you to share it. On the one hand, it's a bit of seeking clarity. On the other hand, it's indeed seeking an optimal solution. And if that happens, keep in mind that either it happens or the Dutch person will want to get more clarity. This is decouple the content from the person. This is by no means is a message that he feels you're incompetent. Not at all. It is seeking clarity, and it is seeking the best solution together. So as a Malaysian, provide more feedback, also not on just what you're going to do, but how you plan to do it. Just spell that out, especially the first few times you are interacting with a Dutch colleague. That builds trust. That builds trust that you know what you're doing, basically. And invite feedback as well. And from the Dutch side, conversely, keep this in mind that your questions, which although they might be well intended, could go down as a message of the Malaysian colleague as he doesn't trust me. And what really helped me, especially it still helps me, is that ask a Malaysian colleague for guidance as well in unpeeling the layers, for example. So this would be my advice for a Dutch person: is we will not build. I'm 37 years old, and you're 77 years old. I spent 7 years in Malaysia. I can never catch up with a Malaysian. So the best way is to learn from the Malaysians. So ask feedback on that as well. It's when you've had a meeting, what was the message? Can you translate it a bit for me with my Dutch sensors, which are lacking all the layers, and that can give you very good insights, and that helps you to train. And for a Malaysian, please do so, asked or unasked. Help your Dutch colleague to translate the message. He probably, if you feel that he's going in a totally different direction, he probably didn't pick it up. He doesn't mean it wrong. He just didn't pick it up. Help him translate, and that will be very much appreciated by the Dutch.
Okay, thank you, Marie. I'll three of each, no problem. Delights, of course. I think you've heard very much everyone saying it. The Dutch are very informal. I think that's a great plus. They are on first name basis from the word go. In fact, when I first joined Shell, I remember meeting my direct manager. He introduced himself as, "Hello, I'm Hans." That was it. It's not like I'm Hans Hombrook or something. I'm just Hans, and that works out very well. It breaks the ice so quickly that you tend to get comfortable. Although it takes some adjustment because you're not used to that culture. I remember when the ambassador himself, he never introduced himself as I'm Mr. whoever. It's just I'm just Scott, or I'm just Karin, or Harry Maulana, just Harry. And I remember when the Dutch Prime Minister came to Malaysia as well, and Mark Rutte introduced himself, I'm just Mark. That's it. I mean, you never get a Malaysian Prime Minister introducing him like that. I mean, there's no way. Then there's no airs whatsoever as far as the Dutch are concerned. Doesn't matter who you are or what you are doing. You are just another individual. I think that's great. The humility is great. The second point that I find delight working with the Dutch is the punctuality. We didn't say much about that one, but the Dutch are very punctual. If you set up a meeting to see them at 3 o'clock, you better be there at 3 o'clock because you'll be sure that they'll be there 5 to 3 waiting for you. And if you're late, they'll be very clear to make sure that they look at the watch in front of you and say, look, it's not quite 3 o'clock. No, it's 5 past 3 or 10 past 3. The Malaysians, of course, have this flexible, stretchable time. They'll walk in half an hour late and think that it's okay. But no, not with the Dutch. You should keep to your time. In fact, it's so well run that even in Holland, I know most trains work on time in most countries, but in Holland, even the buses arrive at their station at the stops on time within a minute. And I remember being there 2 minutes late, I missed the bus. That never happens in Malaysia. In Malaysia, if you're half an hour late, you probably might still catch the bus. And the third one, of course, is the most obvious one that I like working with the Dutch is their direct and frank way of telling you things and how they feel. They're open they're very blunt. And the bluntness actually helps a lot because it does not require you to have to unlayer whatever they're saying because everything is right there in front of you and you know exactly what they mean. So that's working with the Dutch. Straight talking Dutch is easy to deal with. They call a spade a spade. The first one that I think that's very obvious, which the Dutch will always deny when you address them. I mean, you heard Stuart saying that they like to be orderly and proper, and they also tend to be very structured. The bicycle lanes in Holland, you better follow the bicycle lanes only for bicycles. You're not supposed to walk there. The walkway, you're supposed to walk, no bicycles. And they plan their holidays to the letter. I mean, before I went to Holland, I didn't know that you could plan your holidays, a year ahead. But the Dutch do. So I remember when we were discussing programs for the company, and then somebody would say, "Sorry, I already planned this 12 months ahead. You can't change it." So that's the Dutch. They're very proper. But if you ever approach a Dutch and tell them that, oh, you guys are very prim and proper, you follow regulations, you're structured, they will tell you, sorry guys, I'm not like that. The Dutch are not like the German. That's the Germans. The Germans are structured, the Germans are regimented, Germans are orderly. The Dutch are here to actually go against whatever rules there is in place. We are here to break rules because the rules are there to be broken. But in terms of real behaviors, they're not quite like that. But the Dutch will never admit that. The second one about the Dutch is they love to speak Dutch. You'll find that if you are in an environment in a Dutch company, as I was in Shell, I'll be speaking to a Dutch guy in English, and then in walks 2 other Dutch guys, and automatically the Dutch guy who speaks English to me switched to Dutch without even thinking, and they'll be speaking Dutch for about a minute or so before they realize, oh, sorry, I know forgot that you don't speak Dutch. Then they switch back to English, but only for a minute or so, and then they go back to Dutch. But they like to speak Dutch. However, in Holland, if you would go to Holland as a foreigner and they speak to you in Dutch, and then you struggle to speak or reply in Dutch because you're trying your very best to pick up the Dutch language, because they can see that you're struggling, the first thing they'll ask you is, do you speak English? And as soon as you say you speak English, they switch to English immediately. So they'll just speak English, and there goes your chance to practice your Dutch. So the thing is, the funny thing is that, of course, when they're away from their country, they like to speak Dutch. When you're in their country, you're trying to speak Dutch, they'll speak English to you. That's the challenge that you have. So it's very difficult to speak Dutch when you're in Holland. And lastly, the third one, on terms of, it's not really a challenge, but in terms of something I found which is a bit odd, the punctuality of the Dutch. They're very punctual in everything they do. And I don't know whether what I'm about to say is something that's reflective of a general and culture in Holland. But I recall when I first went to Holland, my first trip, my wife and I were invited for dinner by a Dutch couple, and they said, "Come for dinner at 8 o'clock." So we were there 10 to 8. So you must be punctual, not be there on time or earlier than time. So we went and rang the bell of the house. but nobody actually opened the door. It was like, there was nobody there. So we thought maybe we got the wrong day or the wrong time. So we walked away for a while, walked until it's 8 o'clock. So we came back 8 o'clock, rang the bell, and had to wait for about a minute or so before the door was open. And then the host came in and said, "Oh, sorry about that. We're not quite ready yet, but you can come in." And so we came in, had dinner and everything. And then at the end, when we were having coffee, he said, Zainul, in Holland, when we are normally punctual for everything, meetings, but when we invite you for a casual dinner, it would be great if you come 10 to 15 minutes late, because that will give the hostess or the host a chance to finalize everything they have to prepare for you. So that give them the extra 10, 15 minutes so that they can be ready for you, really ready for you. So that was something that we really had to think hard and say, this is not something that you'd ever expect of a Dutch. But apparently, at least for this particular Dutch couple, they say that's how they were brought up. When you're invited for dinner, please don't come on time. Be slightly late to help the host and hostess to prepare for the food and all that. You should always, as a Malaysian, remember that the Dutch will be plain, straight, and honest about whatever they want to say to you. So you should not take things personally. You must remember that when you're in a business discussion, anything that's discussed around the table is all about business. It's not personal. So don't take it too hard. So if there is a very heavy discussion where hard words are being dropped here and there, please don't leave the room feeling depressed that this fellow has been rude to you and all that, because it's all part and parcel of an honest, robust discussion. So we must remember that. And Malaysians, I think, will have difficulty in taking that away, because no matter how exposed they are to the West, the old Malaysian culture will always stay with a lot of Malaysians. I'm not saying only the Malays. The Chinese do the same thing. They also take things too hard if you're not careful. And the Indians do. It's just that the Europeans sometimes don't understand that. Okay. Second thing is make sure that you're punctual when you have a meeting with them. Don't be late. Don't walk in like you normally do with other Malaysian meetings. Although I know lots of modern Malaysians now are more punctual than the old style Malaysians. But we need to remember that when the Dutch say meet you at 3 o'clock, they mean 3 o'clock, not 3:01 or 3:02. And the last one I think it'll be nice if you could try and understand a bit of their culture as well. And they can be a bit intimidating because they're big and tall, and they can be a bit loud, but that's just them. And they don't mean any harm. Normally, they're very nice guys, very hardworking, and they love birthdays. So if you do have Dutch friends, don't forget their birthdays. They love birthdays. Whether they're man or female, they love their birthdays. And they love to talk about the weather, at least in Holland. I don't know what they do that in Malaysia. They love to talk about the weather. And they love the sun. And when I was in Holland, I used to wonder why they love the sun. Every time there's a bit of sun ray, all the Dutch will walk out and sit in the sun. And then after being there for 7 years, we realized why they do that. Because in Holland, it's generally very gloomy. So whenever there is sunlight, they always need to appreciate the sunlight. But you never know when the next sunlight is going to come. So the Dutch have certain behaviors which we need to understand and why they do it. And they love their Heineken beer, of course. And generally, they are very multilingual. So don't think if you speak French or Spanish, whatever, behind their back, they don't understand. But normally they speak French, they speak Spanish, they speak Portuguese, Belgian, German, and sometimes even good old Bahasa Indonesia. So they are very talented people. So that's all I like to say. I mean, that just take them as they are and don't take things too hard when you're dealing with them. Thank you.
Well, first, Marie, thank you for your excellent moderating, very much appreciated, and Sjoerd and Zainul for their considerable contribution. I think my feeling at the end of this discussion is that, after all, working with the Dutch is a positive experience. If I listen to what I've heard across the board, it takes some adjusting, and there are some peculiarities to this intercourse, but it is a positive experience. The Dutch are egalitarian. They listen to you. They value your opinion, want to hear your opinion. So all in all, I think these are things that will appeal to everybody that works for a Dutch company or in a Dutch organization or institution. I do hope and I think that this session has contributed to further deepen the understanding between the Dutch and the Malaysians. I do think so. It has certainly enlightened me, because I'm also a recently new arrival, at least in Malaysia, only about a year now. And once again, Marie, Zainul, Sjoerd, and to all the people who are still in the room, I would like to thank you for your attendance and for being part of the discussion that we had. Very much appreciated. Thank you.